Cool any room by 15 degrees for free. No AC, no fan, no power. The 3-minute setup. It is 4 in the afternoon and the thermostat in your living room has not stopped running since this morning. You check the app on your phone. The number staring back at you is higher than it was last month, and last month was higher than the one before that. Every forecaster on television is saying the same thing this year. The summer is getting longer and the bills are getting heavier. Here is what almost nobody tells you while they are saying that. There is a setup you can build in about 3 minutes, using things you probably already own, that drops the temperature of a room by as much as 15 degrees Fahrenheit. No electricity, no fan, no unit on the wall, just water, fabric, and a piece of physics older than written language. In ancient Egypt, household servants hung wet reeds and damp linen across doorways and window openings during the hottest part of the day. As dry desert air moved through the wet fabric, the water absorbed heat from that air as it evaporated, and the air coming out the other side was measurably cooler than the air going in. Egyptian builders understood this well enough to angle entire ventilation shafts in palace walls to catch the wind and route it through these wet barriers before it ever reached the living quarters. Around the same era, Persian architects were building tall structures called wind catchers, badgir in Persian, designed to grab high-altitude breeze and pull it down through the building, often across water, before releasing it into the rooms below. Several of these towers still stand in the city of Yazd in Iran today, more than 2,000 years old, and they still work without a single moving part or a single watt of electricity. In Mughal India, palace architects lined window openings with mats woven from a fragrant grass called kus. Servants poured water over these mats through the day, and the evaporating moisture pulled the temperature down inside rooms that would otherwise have been unbearable. And closer to home, Amish farmhouses in places like Holmes County, Ohio, have used a version of this for generations without ever calling it science. A wet sheet across a kitchen window on a baking July afternoon, a bucket of cold well water set on the floor nearby. Nothing complicated, nothing expensive, just water doing what water has always done when it turns into vapor. Evaporating water pulls heat out of the air around it. It is not a trick, and it is not folklore. It is basic thermodynamics, and it has not changed since the first person noticed that a wet cloth on their skin felt cooler in a breeze than a dry one did. Now here's the part most videos on this topic leave out until the very end, after they have already gotten you excited about the number. This method works by adding moisture to the air and then removing heat as that moisture evaporates. That only works well when the air around you is dry enough to actually accept more moisture. In a place like the high desert Southwest, where summer air can be brutally hot but very dry, this setup can realistically pull 10 to 15 degrees out of a room. In a humid climate, the kind you get through most of the Midwest, the Southeast, or anywhere near a coast in summer, the air is already close to saturated. There is less room for that water to evaporate into, so the cooling effect shrinks, and pushing too much extra moisture into an already humid room can leave things feeling damp rather than relieved, and over time can encourage mold if a space does not dry out properly between uses. So this is not going to replace your air conditioner if you live somewhere humid, but it is still a real, free tool worth having, especially paired with a couple of other old methods that do not depend on dry air at all. Here is exactly how to build it. You need one bowl or bucket that can hold around a gallon of water. Cold tap water is fine. Ice helps for the first half hour if you have it. You need 1 or 2 cotton towels or a cotton sheet. The older and more worn the better, since natural fiber holds and releases water far more efficiently than synthetic fabric does. And you need a window with some air movement, either a breeze from outside or a second window open on the other side of the room so air has somewhere to go. Soak the cotton completely in the cold water and wring it out only enough that it stops dripping everywhere. You want it as wet as you can reasonably hang it. Drape it across the window opening so air has to pass through it rather than around it. A single layer stretched fairly flat works better than something bunched up or doubled over. Then set your bowl of water on the windowsill or the floor directly beneath the hanging fabric, so as the cloth dries out, it is also drawing up moisture from the bowl below it. That's the whole setup. Air moving through that wet fabric will come out the other side noticeably cooler than the air that went in. In dry conditions, you can expect somewhere in the 10 to 15 degree range. In more humid conditions, expect something closer to 4 to 6 degrees. Still real, just smaller. You will need to re-wet the fabric every few hours as it dries out, which takes about 30 seconds. If you want something with a bit more staying power, there is an enhanced version of this same idea that has been used for centuries to keep food cold without any refrigeration at all. sometimes called a pot-in-pot cooler. You take 2 unglazed clay pots, one small enough to sit inside the other with about an inch of space between them. Pack that gap completely with coarse sand and saturate the sand with water until it will not absorb any more. Cover the top with a damp cloth. As the water in the sand evaporates through the porous outer pot, it pulls heat continuously out of the inner pot, and that inner pot will sit noticeably cooler than the surrounding air for hours at a time on a single soaking. People still use smaller versions of exactly this to keep vegetables and milk fresh in places without reliable refrigeration. There are 2 other old methods worth knowing, because they do not depend on dry air at all. They work by moving heat instead of evaporating water. The first is a rhythm farm families have followed for generations without ever naming it. In the evening, once the outside air starts dropping, you open windows on opposite sides of the house and let that cooler night air move all the way through, soaking into the floors, the walls, the furniture, everything with any mass to it. Then at sunrise, before the day heats up, you close everything back down tight, blinds and curtains included, and seal the house against the heat outside. The walls and floors you cooled overnight keep absorbing heat from the indoor air all day instead of letting outdoor heat in, which is why old farmhouses with thick walls often stay noticeably cooler through the afternoon, even with no air conditioning running at all. This works best when there is a meaningful drop between your daytime and nighttime temperatures, which is common across a lot of the country in summer, even where humidity is high. The second goes back to what Persian and Roman engineers were doing with underground channels, and it has been studied more recently in genuinely humid tropical climates, which matters because this one is not limited by humidity the way wet cloth is. Researchers in Malaysia buried piping about 1 meter underground and measured the soil there running roughly 6 to 9 degrees Celsius cooler than the peak air temperature above ground, with the actual air coming out the far end of the pipe measuring 6 to 7 degrees Celsius cooler than the air going in. It is a bigger project than a wet towel in a window, but it is the one option here that keeps working even when the humidity makes evaporative cooling weak. The limit is real too. This works far better in dry air than in humid air, and there is no point pretending otherwise. A wet sheet and a bowl of water tonight will tell you in about 20 minutes exactly how much it can do for the air where you live. Try the wet cloth setup this week and see what kind of drop you actually get in your own house. If you're in a more humid climate, pay attention to whether the night flush rhythm of opening up at sundown and sealing up at sunrise does more for you than the wet fabric alone, because for a lot of humid regions, that is genuinely the stronger tool of the two. We will get into the next one soon.